The Fable and Folly Network supports creators of exceptional audio stories, including the one you're listening to right now. If you love our shows, we want to hear from you. Complete our listener survey at fableandfolly.com/survey. This will help us learn more about you, what you like, what you'd like to hear more of, and how we can maintain an inclusive, safe atmosphere. As a thank you for your participation, we have extras and behind-the-scenes content from your favorite shows. Fans make the network what it is. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to hear from you. Find our listener survey at fableandfolly.com/survey today.
Hey, this is Alex from Wolf of the Door Studios. We wanted to share with you a brand new show that's coming out called World Gone Wrong. This is a fictional chat show hosted by two best friends, Malik and Jamie. They were roommates until the world fell into total chaos, and now they're living in different parts of the country dealing with the everyday realities like acid rain, werewolves, aliens, vampires, etc. Super nuts. These days, I think that the sentiment of trying to figure out how to live through an apocalypse with your friends is something I can kind of relate to. Anyway, we would love if you would check out this new podcast. It's from the amazing team who created the fiction podcast Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. Great show. You can listen to World Gone Wrong all the usual places that you listen to podcasts, and you can learn more at audaciousmachinecreative.com. And stick around at the end of today's episode to hear a snippet of the show. All right, thanks so much. Talk soon. Modes of Thought in Anterran Literature. Second Year Classics, Harvard University. Okay, let's get this going. Yeah, ready? Settle down. Okay, just checking again here because there's a lot of you. I want to make sure you're in the right place. This is Modes of Thought in Anterran Literature. It's C667, and because it also applies to lit majors, it's L640. C667 and L640. So that's where you are. If you're in the wrong place, now's your chance to politely duck out. Cool? Okay, so this class is a continuation. We're building on what we laid out in C657. If you really want a gold star, you should listen to the lectures from those classes. That'll give you the context that you need to delve into what we're going to go into, which is Anterra at the dawn of the Third Empire. In our earlier class, we discussed the formation of Anterra and what's called the Second Empire, which is really odd. It's the first phase of the culture, and it resulted in the main city called Prime A, nicknamed Dark City. It resulted in Prime A becoming the center of, well, for them, what was probably the center of the known world. And it was pretty idyllic, honestly. There were abundant resources. There was very little in terms of class hierarchy. They had a very evolved notion of gender and fluidity between genders. They had coordinated childcare. They had no evidence of slavery, and what seemed to be a pretty resilient social welfare system, even distribution of food and goods, etc., etc. So all of this was solidified by a sort of membership ritual known as the Matoka ritual. I want to emphasize this because we've only seen this kind of collectivism in very small groups in other cultures. In the earliest villages, we see Göbekli Tepe, for example, people are living very close. They're literally walking over each other's roofs to get to their own homes. So obviously in a society like that, they're going to have kind of a collectivist intent. You know, we will survive, we will grow food and keep our people alive. But as soon as societies get any larger, we have kingdoms. An elite class controlling the means of production, and as you know, most of the earliest writing in cuneiform is accounting to keep track of those goods, what was bought and sold. That's a general human instinct we just can't escape, it seems. All right, then there was a shift. And what was called the Matoka ritual was transformed into something called the Ratak ritual. The ritual, for those of you who didn't do the reading, ritual seems to have been performed annually. It was performed on those coming of age in the society. We don't know what that age was. And it involved pretty brutal sacrifice on the part of the participants. They cut off the fourth finger from their left hand. As this was performed, they became, accepted members of Dark City. So after the Matoka ritual was sort of modified into this Ratak ritual, an elite suddenly came to power. And a portion of the population of the entire city was enslaved. Again, all of this is in the course materials from the earlier classes, so if you're interested in knowing what the hell we're talking about, you're going to have to catch up. Okay, dawn of the Third Empire. It's right around this time, after the transformation of the ritual, that we first hear stories of Yalitsok'aa. This is a very formative hero myth, and I think it's a wonderful story. And I think it really sets the tone for what the ideals of early Third Empire Anterra were focused on. Now, the story of Yalitsok'aa has a lot of versions. These are carved on the walls of various buildings throughout Prime A, and some even more abstracted versions are found in Prime B, the second smaller city. But the most common version I found goes like this. I'm quoting here from Mem Itari the Elder. Quote, "Upon breaking the chains of all fear, the children of Dark City were reckless and wild. They climbed the mountains and laughed at the gods. They crossed the seas and filled them with the blood of insects." This is a translation thing here because the word they used, insect or bug, is also used as an insult, kind of meaning inconsequential being. So we don't know exactly how to parse this other than to say that we're looking at a state that is in a certain amount of chaos. Memitari continues, the Geja's ruler, right? The Geja feasted on magical plants, and music echoed across the valley for 999 days, until at last the court slept. For days, the people of Dark City slept like the dead, unable even to dream. Upon awakening, the Geja found his children were missing. "Where are my offspring?" he cried. They searched the city and the mountains and the caves, but the children were not found. Mem Yalitsok'aa was a fine offspring of the divine Fatha. If you remember here, Fatha is the god of water, sort of a Neptune equivalent. And he had two friends, Mem Arqua and Ra Stiana. Arqua and Stiana convinced Yalitsok'aa to venture out onto the water to look for the lost children. I'm going to skip ahead here. They had a few adventures along the way, and they're fascinating. I'll post the long form version of this story for you all. Continuing to quote here, they came to a land that was verdant and quiet, with crested birds singing and monkeys swinging in the trees. Tired from the boats, they rested and prayed. In the morning, the three of them ventured into the forest, following a shallow, cold river of fresh water. When they came to a lagoon, they saw a beautiful woman bathing in the water. When the woman saw the intruders, she screamed out for help, afraid that something untoward might befall her in her nakedness. It was Arqua, in fear, who took the woman, and the three of them ran back to their camp at the water's edge. And it continues here. Yalitsok'aa said to his friends, "We must not take this human. Listen to the birds of the air as they scream, and the monkeys in the trees are shaking the branches and crying out. The gods will abandon us if we do this." So he's facing a moral dilemma here, right? His friends seem to want to steal this beautiful young lady, motivated by fear. If she has friends around, they might attack. And Yalitsok'aa knows that this is not the right action. Continuing to quote Memetari here. Arqua and Stiana whispered through the night. The fire shone in their eyes as they had evil thoughts. Ungodly is the word as it translates. Yalitsok'aa tried to stay awake as best he could to prepare for any troubles, but Stiana prided him with wine and song and her body, and eventually he slept. Upon awakening, he was alone on the beach. This was the loneliest dawn. I love that phrase, right? It's great. The loneliest dawn. Okay, now, if you remember from last class, the Ramayana started off with a poem. In the story of Yalitsok'aa, the poem comes in here. When he's abandoned on the island by his friends who have stolen this beautiful woman and left him on the beach to die, he writes a poem. In the story, it doesn't actually show us the poem. It only mentions that it exists, which is kind of a tease. The poem is a heartfelt lament proclaiming that all people and demons and gods should live in harmony, which, again, is a thought that I love and feels like it harkens back to Second Empire. So he recites his poem on the beach in his sorrow, and he's approached by a crested bird. The bird says that it's the most beautiful poem he's ever heard, and he'd like to deliver it to the gods. Quote, "Before you agree, you must know that if you give the poem to me, I will bring it to all the gods, but you will forget the words you have written, and it will bring you no solace any longer." Now, this notion that giving away the poem to the gods will somehow remove it from Yalitsok'aa, I don't know. It's very interesting to me. We don't generally think of poetry as this sort of commodity that's a zero-sum game. Like if I have a bushel of corn and I give it to you, now I no longer have a bushel of corn. But poetry doesn't work that way, right? So I'm curious as to why they thought a story or a poem could somehow be excised from Yalitsok'aa's mind. It's fascinating. Nevertheless, he does give the poem to the gods via this messenger, the crested bird. And the gods love it so much that they read it once a year, and the emotions it brings out when they read it cause storms around the world. And so that's the reason for the rainy season in Anterran culture, is the rainy season happens because the gods are reading Yalitsok'aa's lament. It's beautiful. The crested bird, as payment for the poem, gives Yalitsok'aa a boat so he can return to Dark City. Of course, Diana and Arqua are not so happy to see him when he shows up. Yalitsok'aa puts his former friends in jail and assumes the role of Geja, his rightful role. Then he goes to see the prisoner, the beautiful woman who Arqua and Stiana took, right? And this is giving me Helen of Troy vibes, right? He goes to see her and asks what she would have him do. And she responds, "It does not matter, for giants and apes will attack this island, and we will all die in our own ways, as the gods have ordained." Stoic. Getting this forewarning, Yalitsok'aa prepares for battle, but he's too late. A giant comes with an army of apes and attacks the kingdom. He uses his crested feather, the feather from the bird that was a messenger to the gods, he uses it to raise a mountain so he has the higher ground in the battle. But it's still not enough. And the apes kill his armies, and he's stranded on the mountain peak. He's so mad that the gods have forsaken him that he burns the feather, and the ashes of it spill out into the ocean. This actually starts the last chapter of the Yalitsok'aa myth, but we're going to wait on that. The point I wanted to make today is this. To my understanding, this myth sounds like the exact inverse of the Ramayana, and that's why I asked Sanvi to talk about the Ramayana last week. It's like they're two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that fit together. Meaning, the woman that Arqua and Stiana took is Sita, Rama's wife. The giant who attacks the island, that's Hanuman. So, is it possible that the myth of Yalitsok'aa is actually a report from the other side of the battle against Ravana in the Ramayana? That's the question. The answer is yes, chronologically, and in terms of the interaction between cultures in Southeast Asia and Micronesia, it is completely possible. Unlikely? Yeah. It's unlikely. It's totally a stretch. And plenty of scholars would say the fact that these two stories kind of mirror each other is purely because myths have their own sort of psychological parameters, this kind of unconscious logic. And so certain key elements recur. The capture of a beautiful woman, for instance, happens in plenty of myths. We got Helen of Troy, of course, but also Dara was kidnapped by Hyrus and brought to the underworld, as was Persephone. They really like kidnapping women and taking them to the land of the dead for some reason. We just sort of have to assume that this plays out some emotional logic in our collective unconscious. That's what Jung would say. There, of course, myths of great battles too. Troy again, but also the Battle of the Red Cliffs in early Chinese history. And plenty of betrayal by friends. Medea, betrayed by Peleus. Loki betrays Balder with the spear made of mistletoe. Guinevere and Lancelot betray Arthur. It's such a strong human emotion, the sense of betrayal by the ones that we trust the most. So, I guess of course it winds up in our stories, and when those stories become old enough, they become our myths. Okay, so that's what I wanted to point out in the Myth of Yalitsok'aa. Though we should also look at what it says about the nature of this new third empire, Anterra. Prior to this, we have stories of the gods creating difficulties for humans, but this is the first time we see that betrayal that I was just talking about amongst members of Anterra. So suddenly, you can't trust your fellow citizen. It's interesting, right? Considering that there was this movement to enslave part of the population, and a more traditional caste hierarchy comes into effect, what we're seeing kind of looks like a feudal system that we're more used to seeing in, the West. Another thing, Yalitsok'aa advocates for not taking the beautiful woman, who I'm claiming is Sita, right? There's clearly some sort of morality, unless he's suggesting that to do so would be an offense to the gods and would bring about retribution, in which case this is really about self-preservation, right? But it doesn't say that in the text. So I may be projecting some kind of Arthurian chivalry that doesn't really belong. It's possible that something completely different is going on in terms of the moral structure of Third Empire and Terra. But they have memorialized and honored a character who advocated to maintain a relationship with the gods over fear. And I think that may be the sort of starting point for looking at what the values are in Third Empire and Terra. So beyond the question of morality, the last question that I'm left with, and I don't know if anybody noticed this, but what happened to the original missing children? There were 2 princelings that went missing. That's what Yalitsok'aa went looking for in the first place. They're never mentioned again. So, yeah, very interesting that that's just left as an unsolved mystery in the Myth of Yalitsok'aa. Okay, like I said, there's a lot we don't know. It's all new material, so maybe together we can come up with some fresh perspectives. Great. Also, you need to start thinking about your thesis topics, so you can use your brains for that too. All right, that's it. I'll see you guys next week. Modes of Thought in Anterran Literature. This podcast is made possible by Harvard University, a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Peeler Prize in Archaeological Literature, and the Harbridge Family Trust, with an in-kind donation and production assistance from Wolf at the Door Studios. For more information and course materials, please visit Wolf at the Door's website at wlfdr.com.
The Fable and Folly Network, where fiction producers flourish.
Hello, hello. I'm Malik.
I'm Jamie.
And this is World Gone Wrong, where we discuss the unprecedented times we're living through.
Can your manager still schedule you for night shifts after that werewolf bit you?
My ex-boyfriend was replaced by an alien body snatcher, but I think I like him better now.
Who is this dude showing up in everyone's old pictures?
My friend says the sewer alligators are reading maps now.
When did the kudzu start making that humming sound?
We are just your normal millennial roommates processing our feelings about a chaotic world in front of some microphones.
World Gone Wrong, a new fiction podcast from Audacious Machine Creative, creators of Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. Learn more at audaciousmachinecreative.com.
Find World Gone Wrong in all the regular places you find podcasts.
I love you so much. I mean, you could, up the energy a little bit.
You could up the energy.
I actually don't take notes.
That was good.
I'm just kidding. You sounded great.
So did you.